Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the definitive edition, released 3 years ago with a flurry of unforgivable bugs and a visual style that was left lacking the charm and atmosphere of the original games on PlayStation 2. In my last video, I covered San Andreas, and to my surprise, while not being perfect, the visual style of the game was improved tenfold and now resembles the original that much closer. In this video though, I don't want to go over every bug that's been fixed with the new update or every other change made. Instead, I'd like to vibe check Vice City and see just how well the new classic lighting represents what we're all used to from the original game. For this comparison, we're going to be looking at the PC version of Vice City Definitive Edition, as well as the PlayStation 2 version of Vice City running under software emulation in its original resolution. The PlayStation 2 version of the game has an added visual option that changes the look of the game quite a bit. Trails is an effect that adds motion blur to Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City, but it also adds a color wash to the scene that changes the atmosphere quite dramatically. This option was only available for Vice City on consoles. Turning it off, the game looks just like the PC version. So for the sake of being thorough, I'm going to be comparing the new classic lighting in the definitive edition to the PlayStation 2 version with trails both on and off. So let's get right into the comparison. As of the date of recording, the clear weather type and the sunny weather type on the definitive edition both seem to have clouds in the sky most of the time, unlike the original where only sunny weather had clouds. I'll cover both anyway, but keep that in mind. We'll start here on Ocean Beach, where it's a clear, sunny morning. The sky is a light blue that blends into a peach color. The entire scene is very warm, and you can actually see quite far into the distance from here, and there doesn't seem to be any fog in that distance. Let's take a quick look at this scene with trails off. Here the colors are a lot cooler. This is something that we'll see quite a lot between these two. The difference in sky color is definitely noticeable. Moving over to the definitive edition pre-patch, the view distance is just about the same, but the colors in the scene are all wrong. The sky goes from a dark purple down to a pink and then down further to an orange color. Compared to some of the skies in San Andreas, it's not bad, but it's also not Vice City. Looking at the new classic lighting, the sky color is surprisingly a much lighter shade of blue, but it blends into a much yellower color than on the PlayStation 2. There is an added fog in the distance too, around where the view distance was on PlayStation 2. Overall, it does look similar, but it's definitely not the same. However, it's a big improvement over the game pre-patch. Moving over to midday with trails on, the PS2 version looks like this. There is a bright blue sky with a very subtle gradient towards the top. Again, there's no fog present in the distance here, but we also can't see beyond this building. Here's how the game looks with trails off. The colors are a lot cooler, but the bright blue sky remains, albeit a darker shade. Let's look at the definitive edition pre-patch. The sky is still bright blue, though the lighting in the sky looks a lot more on the realistic side. There are also some volumetric clouds in the skybox and the environment is very bright. The new classic lighting, however, brings back a very similar looking sky that blends into a color on the horizon not dissimilar to the one on PS2, though the gradient isn't as prominent. The draw distance here is quite far, as we can see some of these trees here far in the distance, though there is a slight fog to blend it a little bit better. A noticeable difference here are the clouds in the sky, something not present on the PS2. However, I don't mind this too much, as it does help fill the scene. Moving on to the evening, we can see an orange sky with a hint of blue towards the top. Not much else has changed here. Let's look at the game with trails off. A much colder scene with a different colored sky, mostly blue with a hint of yellow at the horizon. The definitive edition pre-patch looked like this. The sky colors of course don't match, but I have to say I really don't like the volumetric clouds they added to the skybox in this version. They look quite ugly in my opinion. The new classic lighting quite accurately recreates the PS2 trails look. The lower part of the sky is an identical shade of orange, while the color at the very top is ever so slightly off. At night, the moon looms over Vice City to a deep midnight blue sky. Turning trails off, we can see that the sky color hasn't really changed, but the rest of the lighting gets a lot cooler as expected. Pre-patch, the game looked like this. A black sky that bleeds into a bright purple. The lighting is also very even across this scene, and the clouds ruin an otherwise fine skybox. The classic lighting, however, gives the night sky a much different look to that of the PS2. This purple distance fog was not present in the original game. From here, we can also see that the water still does not look like the original in any way. It doesn't have that iconic texture, nor does it have the right color. This is an interesting start to our look, to say the least. There seems to be a few more differences that I've spotted this time around compared to San Andreas, and there's much more to come yet. Next, I want to talk about Vice City's Foggy Weather, as this is the most interesting one to me. We'll start off by looking at these traffic lights at midnight, where the fog is thick and the atmosphere is drab. The draw distance has been brought in extremely close. You can't see that far in front of you at all. There is also volumetric fog lining the streets in the PlayStation 2 version, and it's easily lit up by any nearby light source. The traffic lights, for example, light up the fog below, as will any nearby street lights. Turning off trails here makes basically no difference at all, although the image is slightly darker. Pre-patch on the Definitive Edition is completely different. The sky is cloudy and grey, and there is also the faintest haze. It's barely noticeable. If we look at the new classic lighting, you'll notice that there is a distinct lack of fog. Seriously, where's the fog? There is some fog far in the distance, but it should be much thicker than this. There is also no volumetric fog in this version of the game at all. This weather comes across more as overcast than it does foggy. The color of the sky does match the PS2 version of the game, but this is just not enough to bring back the original look of the game. The new fog in the Definitive Edition left me very disappointed, and I was really hoping that they would have added that back in the way that it was. If we move over to midday on the PS2, the sky is a much brighter shade of grey, and the fog is still thick. Every part of the screen is covered in fog, and you can't see much past these buildings ahead. Turning off trails, everything seems about the same, just a bit darker. Pre-patch, you would be forgiven for not realizing that this is actually the foggy weather type. The clouds are thick, but behind them is a bright blue sky. The draw distance is way too far, and there is absolutely no fog to be seen, not even in the distance. This is truly baffling. Moving over to the classic lighting, we actually get a scene that looks something like the PlayStation 2 version of the game. The color of the sky seems to match up, but the fog is relegated to the distance instead of coating the environment around you. The colors in this environment also don't seem nearly as dull as they should be in this lighting. It makes most of the stuff in this scene look like it's made of plastic. This is due to the new textures and colors for the objects interacting with the lighting in a much different way. Not to mention the ground in general is just much too lit. This is another shot where we can really see the water in the game, and how different it is between games. I still feel the stylized water of the original game is much better than this generic wet we have here. Let's move on now to rainy weather and see how that holds up. This is around 6 AM in the original with trails on, and we can see that all color has been sucked out of this scene, leaving behind a dreary grey sky, and there's an ever so slight greyish-green tint to the environment. Not to mention Vice City's rather convincing rain effects. Clouds can be seen floating through the sky, blown by the strong winds. The fog in the distance has rolled in, but not too far. Taking a quick look with trails off, some color is returned, as that greyish-green tint is no longer present. However, the scene still looks just as good in terms of weather effects. The pre-patch Definitive Edition, to shamelessly reuse a joke from my last video, is piss poor. The draw distance, as usual, is about as far as the eye can see, and there's no distance fog. The sky behind all of those clouds is still a bright blue, and it doesn't scream heavy rain to me. Also, what's going on with the lightning flashes here? Can somebody explain why the lightning makes the world darker? Is it anti-lightning? The new classic lighting does a pretty decent job at recreating the original here. The sky color is about right, but there needs to be more clouds in the sky for my liking. The draw distance is much better than the original, allowing you to see much further into the distance. However, it does eliminate some of the atmosphere of the original. The lightning also thankfully works as intended here. There is a distinct lack of any kind of fog or nearby haze. And of course, the low-flying clouds from the original are still not present in the Definitive Edition. Let's have a look at some more times of day. At around 2 PM, the original game looks like this. Basically the same scene as before, just with a lighter sky and environment. There's nothing more to be said about it here. With trails off, the sky darkens just a bit, and the cooler tones with trails off persist. Here's the DE pre-patch. Arguably not much different from the morning. The new classic lighting still has a few problems in my book. First of all, the draw distance is still way too high. The color of the sky is a pretty similar color, yet this scene yet again highlights another problem with the water. It always seems to be the same color all the time, and that color always feels wrong. In the original, no matter the time of day or the weather, the water seemed to match up and blend in with the scene perfectly. Here it stands out way too much for my liking, and I know I keep saying it, but the ground also seems way too lit for this kind of weather. Lastly, for the evening, the original gets real dark real quick, and the clouds here are still rolling around the sky. Here's how the game looks with trails off. We all see the differences. Pre-patch, the definitive edition looked like this. The sky is purple and orange behind those thick clouds, in case you were wondering. Honestly, the water looks pretty damn good here to my eyes. The classic lighting, however, looks like this. A very similar gradient is happening here in the sky. I have to give them credit for that. And finally, the fog in the distance has rolled in just a little bit, though not as much as I would like. The game still needs those clouds floating around the air to fill up the sky a little more though, and to add a little bit more character back to this weather type. Now let's run through Overcast quickly. As we've already pointed out a lot so far, you should know what you're looking for, so hopefully I shouldn't need to repeat myself. Here's how the morning looks with trails on. We get a dreary scene for sure, with a bright grey sky. Trails off, it looks like this. Much darker this time. Pre-patch, the game still has a bright blue sky with some clouds overhead. Here we can also see some of the ugly LODs that this trilogy is infamous for. Classic lighting brings back a grey sky and some fog in the distance. It's almost enough to make these LODs seem okay. Still, I think there's quite a difference between the original lighting and the new classic lighting. Moving right on through to the evening, where we can see the sky has darkened quite a bit, but the rest of it still looks pretty consistent. Here's the original with trails off. It's quite dark and moody now, isn't it? Looking at the definitive edition pre-patch, I don't even want to talk about it, to be honest. But classic lighting brings back a very similar shade to the original. However, the atmosphere of the original, in my opinion, hasn't been brought back in full force like a lot of the San Andreas lighting and weather effects. As I mentioned at the start of the video, the sunny weather type on the definitive edition seems to share most, if not all of its effects with the clear weather type. Either way, let's take a look at a few times of day. Here's how the game looks with trails on. I love the way this game looks. Vice City's sunny weather is basically just the clear weather with some clouds in the sky anyway, so there wasn't really a big difference there in the first place. The sky is that same light blue that blends into that lush orange color. With trails off, the colors are toned down quite significantly, and the sky is much more blue than it is orange. Pre-patch, it looked like this. Blue sky, but blending into a bright pinkish purple towards the horizon. Classic lighting has this clear blue sky that fades into a yellowish color. Once again, I can assure you that this is the same weather type. The colors in this scene do seem a lot closer to the original, yet I don't like that horizon color. At midday on PS2, we get a light blue sky with clouds, basically the same lighting and colors as the clear weather type. Here it is with trails off. And here's the pre-patch version of the game. This is the regular sunny weather that was also used pre-patch for GTA 3 and San Andreas. Classic lighting has brought that bright blue sky back, alongside some clouds. The draw distance here is also practically identical to the PS2 version. Finally, the evening for this weather looks like this on PS2. The sky is mostly orange, leaving little room for the pale blue to seep through. Here's how it looks with trails off. Basically the same, though with less vibrant colors. Pre-patch, the DE looked like this. The purple sky is back here, and there is, of course, no distance fog. The classic lighting does a fantastic job here in my opinion. The colors in the sky, while they do manifest differently, do seem to be quite accurate to the trails on version of the game. So, how does Vice City's classic lighting hold up? It's honestly hard to say. In some cases, they've done a fantastic job of recreating the look of the original game. However, in others, it seems like they've done the bare minimum. It is abundantly clear to me at least, that the classic look that they were going for was indeed the PlayStation 2 version of the game with trails on. That's where most of the lighting, sky, and weather effects seem to match up the most, with barely any of the comparisons done here today looking like the trails off version of the game. The problem with this is that they are missing the one key feature that gave Vice City that classic look. As I mentioned up top, the trails effect introduces a color wash to the scene that gives the setting its vibrant and colorful look. However, this color wash doesn't just affect the skybox or weather effects, it affects everything that's on screen. This is how the sky achieves its color in the original game. The effect of the color wash has been added to the skybox of Vice City Definitive Edition, but it has not been added globally like it was in the original. So there is a distinct difference between these two versions of the game. One of them adds a color wash to the base version of the game, allowing it to achieve that vibrancy and color that we're all used to. However, the Definitive Edition has taken those already washed colors and added them to the skybox, without adding a color wash to the entire game. If they had done that, it would have really looked like the original. Vice City, the Definitive Edition, still has work that needs to be done in my opinion, but the classic lighting that we have in the game now is definitely a step in the right direction. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this video, then please hit that like button, as it really helps the video get seen. Are these changes enough to make you want to play the trilogy again, or have you lost all hope entirely? I, for one, will at least give them another try. Keep it breezy and take it sleazy, my friends.
This is the last dance for Lions fans.